Welcome to Positively Nerdy number 99, comic reviews for early September.
As you know, I'm quite keen on comic books, especially the ones about superheroes.
It says that they insist on outside opinions.
What kind of opinions?
Well, your kind not to put too fine a point on it.
Why would they care what we think?
Hey, where are all my comic books?
Oh, those dreadful things. I gave those away.
Man, I don't even have an opinion.
Well, you gotta have an opinion.
I've spent my entire life doing nothing but collecting comic books. And now there's only time to say, life well spent!
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Positively Nerdy and the latest installment of the comic book review segment here on Positively Nerdy. Real quick, hopefully you guys listen to all the podcasts, but if you don't listen to Ryan and Leah at the movies, then I guess you don't have anything to worry about, although I would encourage you to absolutely listen to Ryan and Leah at the movies every other Friday, where my wife and I discuss the latest movies, trailers, old movies, movie news, anything movie related we feel like talking about. The latest episode had a long, fun discussion on sequel versus reboot versus remake. Anyway, there were apparently some technical difficulties with that show. I want to thank Mike Lacey for being the first to bring it to my attention, because Mike works ungodly early in the morning and is probably the first person to download the podcast every time they come out. However, there were some issues with it jumping around. One of the formats you could listen to it on, I discovered it. The actual file is fine. My iTunes feed was fine when I went back and listened to it per Mike's suggestion. But some other people said they had problems too. Other people said they didn't have any problems. Basically just throwing out a blanket apology / request for help. If you had problems with that episode, please let me know. Just really want everybody to be able to listen and enjoy these podcasts. We work really hard to get them out and do a lot of them. And if you guys can't hear them, then it defeats the entire purpose. So if you guys had trouble with that, just let me know. I'm trying to figure out what it is, because the actual file that I record these and hold on my computer, all of that is fine. The upload appeared to have gone all right. Some people getting it, some people not getting it at all. Makes it very, very difficult to figure out what went wrong when not everybody is having the same problem. So again, I would just encourage anybody who had a problem to reach out to me and let me know how you listen to the show, etc. That might help me narrow it down and prevent it from happening again. Like, hopefully this podcast doesn't have any of those problems, but we'll find that out sooner or later. This is a comic book review episode. We do these twice a month, not every other month, excuse me. And this time around, it's a little later on the issue count. I think we have 11 issues to talk about, which is less than normal. But as you might know if you listened to the previous comic book review episodes, we're not talking about DC Comics at all. I've decided not to participate with the whole Villains Month thing, the Forever Evil thing. Although from most people I heard who read Forever Evil #1, they really seemed to enjoy it, even if it was a kind of a cliche fest. DC's got the best villains. I mean, I love Spider-Man and his Rogues Gallery, but there's no denying that there are some fantastic villains over at DC. So a Villains Month should be a lot of fun. I don't have the interest, especially in the new 52, when they're trying to use this as a gimmick to roll out all these new 52-ized versions of the villains. And I've talked before about how that was part of the problem with the Marvel Ultimate Universe. After a while, they're just throwing out ultimate versions of characters left and right. Who cares if it worked or not? And I feel like that's what they're doing here. So I'm using my wallet to send DC a message. Whether or not they're going to get that message, whether or not other people are going to do that, whether or not other people agree with me, I don't know. But I can't berate the concept and then go out and buy a bunch of the issues. So I'm not buying any of the issues. We do have one DC book, though, we're going to get to later. That's not part of the new 52, which is why we're still going to talk about it. We are going to talk about spoilers, is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of spoilers, so consider this your spoiler warning.
Spoiler alert!
Hey, come on, I haven't seen it yet. It doesn't have anything to do with the plot. Still, I like to go in fresh.
Thank you, spoiler alert.
There you go, a dramatic example of what a spoiler warning is. And because we're going to talk about these books, we're going to talk about what happens in them. And if that is going to ruin it, you either need to go out and read your comics beforehand, or maybe it's going to help you make up your mind. In that case, just keep listening. We're going to start at Image Comics with new Image #1, because that's a special thing that doesn't happen every week. Oh, wait, yes, it does. Anyway, this one caught my eye. Reality Check #1 is actually written by Glenn Brunswick, art by Victor Bogdanovic. I think is how you pronounce that. Excuse me. Okay, first of all, it starts with an opening cliffhanger. Now, I don't know if that's what they're technically called, but that's what I've been calling them. That's what I'm going to label them. I don't know if they have a real name or not. But it starts with this opening cliffhanger of our main character losing his mind. It's 4 a.m., he's so close, I'm not going to let this stop me kind of thing. And then we cut back to 3 months ago, apparently. And he's kind of like this lonely loser type, I guess would be the best way to describe him. Very sexually frustrated, it's pretty apparent. And he is a comic book creator. And he's sitting in a Starbucks one morning, sketching all the pretty girls that are coming in, because he lives in the Los Angeles area, North Hollywood, to be exact. And all the actresses and or wannabe actresses, mostly, that are coming in, he's sketching and trying to get story ideas and jotting down notes himself. And one girl takes a shine to him quite a bit, thinking he's in movies, because that's what she'd like to be, but he's not. And some of the things he's written down draws the attention of her other friend, and he's left sad, alone, and pathetic because he's just a lowly comic book writer. Now, when movies and TV do comic creators and comic writers and comic artists, it's a monstrosity. It's a god-awful mess. It might be even worse to have a comic book writer tell you how terrible a comic book writer's life is. The meta here is just a little bit heavy-handed, talking about the life of a comic book writer. It's kind of a worst-case scenario. Now, I understand that these guys work hard. A lot of people work hard in their jobs. I think the perception, the reason comic book writers and creators and artists in general get upset about it is because people don't take it seriously. When it's an incredibly challenging and difficult field, a highly competitive field, if you can't do it right, there's a dozen other guys and gals who are waiting for their chance to do it right, kind of thing. And none of it is taken seriously by mainstream media, general public, what have you. So it's a little bit too much feeling sorry for himself in this, if I'm being honest. But maybe he's projecting, maybe he's just crafting a good character, I don't know, but it's the references to Marvel and DC. Image is not shy about taking shots at Marvel and DC, even though at this point Image is becoming, they're hardly indie, are they? They're creator-owned, so that's great, but they're hardly, could be considered indie publishers at this point. Anyway, it slips seamlessly into the comic from him creating it and talking about it into the comic itself, the comic adventures of Dark Hour, who kind of looks like the Talons from the recent Batman comic over at DC. And he's got a very Watchmen-esque type logo on his chest. And he's described even in the comics as basically a sexually frustrated Batman type. And he's more concerned with hooking up with his version of Catwoman than he is taking down, looks like their version of Killer Croc is kind of who we've got him battling in this first comic book here. Now, the concept apparently is caught on like wildfire. Diamond is already reissuing. You see what I mean here about, obviously there's some meta messages going on. And apparently a bunch of studios want the movie rights, but the writer doesn't know how this story arc is supposed to end. In the midst of all that, we get a great flashback, and it's basically his origin story. The hero we don't have an origin story for, but the writer we have an origin story for, and it's rather fantastic. For all my complaining about the meta messages and taking too many real-life shots at things, this origin that involves his brother, and his brother saved his life as a kid, and then in college when his brother needed him to save his life, he failed miserably, and how that kind of isolated him, but also gave him the drive to get to working on his comics seriously. Great kind of, again, origin story. I mean, he's not the superhero in this case, but that's exactly what it is. And then we catch back up our sexually frustrated Batman Bruce Wayne type. He basically scares off Catwoman and Vicky Vale all in one night. Now, these characters have their own names, but since they went with the Batman allegory in the comic, that's what I'm going to use to make it easier to describe to all of you. And he's left sad and alone. And then we cut to our comic book writer, who's sad and alone and beating up mirrors, as he was at the very, very beginning. Again, our opening cliffhanger. And who should be at the door at 4 a.m. but Dark Hour. And he basically says, no need to state the obvious, I'm not in your head anymore, I need your help. So, not only is Dark Hour real, but he is some sort of manifestation knowing that this comic creator had him in his head all along. So, bizarre cliffhanger. I'm not sure what to make of this series yet. Obviously, it's one issue, and the point of issue number 1 is to get you to buy issue number 2. And, well, I've already pre-ordered it, so I'm getting it. But I'm intrigued. It's bizarre. It's a little bit weird. I really don't like all the meta. I really don't like Image doing what Image does so well. They have their own expo, it seems like, just to take shots at Marvel and DC. And not that Image isn't doing good stuff and shouldn't be proud of what they're doing. Just shut up and do it. But at the same time, I'm intrigued. I love our main character, whose name I should probably be bothered enough to look up. What is his name? Oh, I can't find it. It doesn't matter. He's a great character. Even, again, the meta messages aside, and now I'm talking about meta messages more than Image was, and in this case our writer was, but what are you going to do? Reality check, it's interesting. If you're looking for something different, it's superheroes, but it's not superheroes because, again, Image breeds this perception that superheroes are bad, but superheroes is why we're all here in the first place, and I love my superhero comics, and I'll never apologize for it. But this one, you're kind of getting a little bit of both. So, and I'm sure that's part of where the Watchmen logo comes in. I'm sure that's not at all an accident. Reality check. If you're looking for something a little bit different, you can do a whole lot worse. Let's talk about another Image book, Chew number 36. Now, they say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but with Chew, or at least this issue of Chew, you absolutely should. Absolutely should. Because we have in the back Tony, female Tony, Toni, in a very Looney Tunes-esque image saying, "She's back, folks. Leave it to Chew to make a humorous cover featuring a character that was recently murdered in an entirely brutal fashion." And we open it up and we get going and we realize that issue number 36 is, in fact, issue number 29.5. So, obviously, they're going back to the Space Cakes story arc and revealing kind of this gap in where Toni was, why she disappeared, what happened to her in this brief chunk of time. Now, we find out, again, I haven't gone back and read Chew from the beginning. I hopped onto this series to try and prove that you can just jump in at any time, and I've been addicted to Chew ever since, so it has proved that you can jump in at any time. Our good buddy Sween Holic was wonderful enough to get me the first trade paperback signed by the creators from his recent trip to HeroesCon over the summer. I haven't got a chance to read that yet because, well, I just haven't gotten a chance to read it, Sween, sorry. And so I don't know if Antonelle Chew, another sister, has been featured before, if this is her debut, but they reveal her power in this, which makes me think this is, in fact, her debut. She has the power, it's eating related as with her siblings. If she eats the exact same thing as the people around her are eating, she absorbs their memories and emotions, kind of things like that. And they show some very, very dramatic examples and humorous examples, as you expect they would. And she basically can't go to Starbucks and drink coffee because everybody else is drinking Starbucks coffee, and somebody might make it the same way and stuff like that. So we see her in a restaurant ordering insanely bizarre food. She's got this haggis type meal. She wants Neapolitan ice cream and a fried egg on it as well. And the waiter goes to another table, and the guy can't decide what he wants. So basically, the waiter suggests the exact same thing, which leads to Toni knowing that this guy is a murderer. Antonelle, knowing this guy's a murderer. And she recruits her sister and her boss to help take this guy down. And there's just kind of the one-off kind of caper story that takes place. Obviously, there are some tiebacks to the rest of the larger Chew saga, and where the toe came from, so on and so forth. We get a fantastic Poyo appearance, a very, very brief cameo and a large splash page. He is alluded to in a panel on the next page is a double-page spread of Poyo in action against Mutant Corn and Superfish. And they're awesome, in my opinion. The big thing to take away from this, though, again, fun one-off story, fills in a few gaps in Tony's story, which if you're not reading Chew, it's not going to convince you to go out and buy it, and I'm just going to sound like a jackass trying to describe it. And if you are reading Chew, then you already know this, and you know what I do, in that this will just make you miss Toni even more than you probably already do. A great, great character, whose death was not gimmicky by any stretch of the imagination. I don't want to put that out there at all, but her death really hit home and is really too bad, and it's great that we can get her back in these little bits, but it's just going to make you miss her even more. So well done, Chew, as always, just fantastic, fantastic stuff. Speaking of fantastic stuff, I mentioned we don't have a lot of comics this week, or this episode, whatever, but we have some fantastic comics to get through. And not the first one, but the next one, is Mouse Guard, Legends of the Guard, number 2, from Archaia, of course, the David Peterson Mouse Guard series, opened up to other creators, usually handpicked by David Peterson, and by usually I mean I believe every single one of them is handpicked by David Peterson. And the overall premise and the pages written and drawn by David Peterson are tavern mice hanging out in a tavern, swapping stories. And the best story, as chosen by the bartender, will have his tab and everything he owes erased. And it's just breeds this competition of storytelling. Not all true, not all fake. Entertain myself and your fellow mice. And the concept worked brilliantly for the first volume of Legends of the Guard. The first issue of the second volume was great, and I'd have to go back and reread them, but this might be the best single issue of Legends of the Guard I've read yet, and I don't know any of these creators, which I think is fantastic. The last one we'll get to is an art style I recognized, but these guys I don't know. I don't know where they're from. I want to know now where they're from. So not only is David Peterson giving us Mouse Guard on a more regular basis by Mouse Guard standards, but he's introducing us to new creators, and these new creators I want to get to know. Our first story is called Love of the Sea by Christian Slade. This is, if you're familiar with Jeremy Bastian of Cursed Pirate Girl, it's a style like that. Not quite as detailed, although it's a disservice to not call it detailed, but you're going up against Jeremy Bastian, nothing is going to be detailed. And it's a silent issue, which... Sucker for silent issues, who's not? Or silent story, because the whole issue is not silent. And it looks like a woodcut. I mean, it's a yellowish paper. It's done in inks. There's no coloring whatsoever other than shading. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's we got a mermouse, which is really, really cool. The character design of that is brilliant. I love the fin mouse ears. And this young shipman rescues a mermouse during this giant sea monster attack. He saves her, and they sail away, and we get this great montage of him growing up, growing old. It's actually just, and of course, a couple panels, and kind of wandering through this town, and the town is gorgeous. The style of the town, and he's this old mouse, and he kind of wanders back to the sea, and of course, the mermouse pops back up. And they kind of just sit and watch the sunset over the ocean together. It is just strikingly gorgeous. And the context of the whole issue and the Peterson page afterwards is basically some of the more gruff mice poking fun at a love story. It's really the first time we've had a story this simple. It's incredibly short. It's only a few pages long, but it's incredibly effective all at the same time. I don't know where Christian Slade comes from, but I'm going to find out because this is breathtaking stuff, just so simple and so dramatic all at the same time. And we've never really had anything that didn't have a whole lot of action or a fox or something dramatic happen. This is just cut and dry, pure and simple. Loved it. Our second episode, I guess would be the best way, our second story, is called Over the Falls by Rick Geary. Rick Geary is not an artist I'm familiar with either. We got a very children's book style. It's very, very fun and simple. Becoming a bit of an expert on children's book art as my son gets a little older and a little more patient to be sat and read to, even though he's still trying to eat the books. But it's that style, but that's not to take away from it at all. And it's a story of a mouse out with his brothers, or her brothers, and they run into a badger. They have to run away. She ends up behind this waterfall and finds this giant cavern network and actually ends up back in her hometown where her brothers and family are mourning, feeling that she's gone. And unfortunately, the badger has found their home, but she is able to lead them back to this cavern behind the waterfall. And so they're all able to live there in peace and well defended as well. This is a very fantastical story, even from my perspective. I'm like, how come we haven't heard of this town before? Because Peterson has all these towns laid out and everything. And I would assume that he gives the creators he picks free reign to do whatever they want. Well, he fixes it. Just like he did in the other one, he kind of poked a little fun at we've never seen a simple love story before. Some of the mice are like, what town is this from? Because this is a girl telling her own story, which we haven't heard too often either. It's usually, passing down a legend kind of mentality. And she's like, oh, no, I'd rather not say, we're in the town that was the hive of support for Midnight's Rebellion. You have to go all the way back to Volume 1, fall of, 1153 for that story, if you're not familiar with Mouse Guard. So some great callbacks there by Peterson himself. But just, again, a fantastical town that Peterson might wish he had thought of, but he's certainly probably going to use now. But now there's a reason why it's not been in any of the Mouse Guard supplemental material to this point. So, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Loved it. Our last one has a kind of an anime style to it. It's called The Shade by Gemma Salume, I'm guessing. Salume, Salume would be what I would guess. It's very stark, bright contrast kind of thing, especially based on the other, a lot of solid colors, I guess. Especially with Peterson, you get a lot of shading. This is a lot of solid colors. And we get a couple guards mice who are just kind of out on patrol doing what they do. And they stumble across a village that's not on any of the maps. And they are told that we have no love of the guards mice. You need to go. You need to get out and go. And they are warned to stay out of the shade of the tree just past the borders of the town. And they go, and one of them basically, we have no time for superstition. There's an owl to hunt, which is the whole crux of why they were out in the first place. And they go into the shade, and one of them disappears. And the other one follows them in, and it basically enters them into this ghost realm kind of thing. Think, to be honest with you, I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but the first thing that popped in my mind was Twilight Princess. It's the same realm, just, a dark bone creature version of it. And they fight their way back out. That army that they had just encountered is there, and the guard mice never came, and we called "You're too little, too late" is what they're being told by these kind of demon warrior mice who are fighting back against the bird that attacked them when they first approached the shade. And they finally, escape the shade. They go back out into the real world, and that town is not there anymore. And they decide that there's one more thing they have to do before they leave this area, and they burn down the tree. If there's no tree, there can be no shadow. And it's an incredibly awesome image, by the way. Two guard mice walking away from the burning tree. It's actually really effective. But it's brought shades like Return of the King with, the dead army. But just like this guard mice aren't infallible. There's people out there who don't like them kind of thing. Mice out there, I should say, who don't like them. 3 brilliant stories by creators I'd never heard of with 3 dramatically different art styles. I've read it several times already. I will read it several more. I absolutely loved it, and I'm pretty sure it's fair to say that that's my favorite single issue of Mouse Guard, Legends of the Guard issues. And if one of these does not win at the end, I will be terribly upset. But at the same time, we have 2 more issues to get through. Who knows what's going to pop up in those issues? All right, moving on now to Dark Horse, The Star Wars #1. Here we go. This is the comic book 8-issue miniseries, I believe, based on George Lucas's original rough draft screenplay, Longer Ago in a Galaxy Even Further Away. That's not from Lucas's script. That's just kind of the tagline they're giving the comic. I will read the what would have been the opening crawl. It'll give you a good idea of the differences in this world. Until the recent Great Rebellion, the Jedi Bendu were the most feared warriors in the universe. For 100,000 years, generations of Jedi protected their art as the personal bodyguards of the Emperor. They were the chief architects of the invincible Imperial Space Force, which expanded the Empire across the galaxy from the celestial equator to the furthest reaches of the Great Rift. Now these legendary warriors are all but extinct. One by one, they have been hunted down and destroyed as enemies of the new Empire by a ferocious, sinister rival warrior sect, the Knights of Sith. This is, and here's another one, just again to familiarize you with anybody who might not be. Back in 1974, still years before a film called Star Wars would take the world by storm, George Lucas completed the first rough draft of a screenplay that was then called The Star Wars. The original screenplay contains all of the now familiar elements of the Star Wars Empire. An evil empire, a young would-be Jedi, an older Jedi Knight who mentors the boy, a princess in need of rescue, and even a father who is more machine than man, but put together in ways far different from what you've seen on the screen. For nearly 4 decades, George Lucas's original vision of the galaxy far, far away existed only as what might have been. This, I've never actually read the original screenplay. Apparently it's out there to be read. And now we're getting an adaptation of it, of course, but I knew of, plots and concepts. Obviously, the Macquarie artwork was based on some early concepts that changed. That's mostly where most of my familiarity with this comes from. Now, when you start reading it, you recognize some styles. You recognize the Star Wars world. It's very McQuarrie heavy, which is fantastic. Which also makes me excited for Rebels that they're using a lot of McQuarrie artwork for that. Star Wars Rebels, the show coming out the new animated show coming out next year. Anyway, in the first 2 pages, though, the subtle references I immediately picked up on was Utapau, which is the battle, the planet of the General Grievous and Obi-Wan fight on for the last time, when Obi-Wan's got the lizard thing, and Grievous is in that circle thing, and the lizard's making that weird noise and running around Utapau. That's Utapau. So apparently this was in the script, or they just threw it in there. I'm not sure, because I haven't read it yet. And we get a little boy saying "Yippee" at the end of the 2nd page. So apparently that's been in Lucas's head for quite some time. Speaking of the Phantom Menace, there's a lot of Phantom Menace in this. From the procedural things that people didn't like about Phantom Menace to the costume designs, all sorts of stuff. I don't know how deep Rinsler went for this. It is written by J.W. Rinsler, art by Mike Mayhew. Rinsler is kind of that guy. I mean, he's up there with like Leland Shee type or Pablo Hidalgo in terms of what he knows and what he has access to, so I would have to believe that this is all legit stuff. Again, I've not read those myself. And we get a very Episode 1 encounter between a Sith and... I mean, it's basically Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin as they appear in Episode 1 fighting a Darth Maul type. And it's all breathtaking, it's exciting, it's dramatic, and it's so cool to look back and, think kind of what might have been. I'll leave a few of the surprises for you guys. If you haven't read it and didn't think that this was worth your time, if you're a Star Wars fan, I definitely would recommend checking this out. It's so cool to see kind of the original concepts and how everything fits but doesn't really. The evil Emperor looks more like Ming the Merciless than the Emperor we came to know. And then we also have a Darth Vader. He's a very different Darth Vader than he was before. Still have a lot of oddball aliens. Still have a lot of political craziness. Our main guy kind of looks a little like George Lucas does now. And we have our princess. And there's a lot of things that are similar and familiar. And again, we mentioned the father who's more machine than man. That concept is in there. Star Destroyers are very different than they were in the smaller. It looks like a couple-person crew. 3 people in a cockpit, basically, is what the Star Destroyers were, as opposed to what they became. And again, if you thought about skipping on this and you are a Star Wars fan, I can't recommend it highly enough. It's very, very cool to see all of these elements at their rawest form before they got... streamlined into the movie saga we all know and love now. Really, really cool stuff. Let's stick with Star Wars. We got a double shot of Star Wars coming up this time around. It's Star Wars number 9, the ongoing series from Dark Horse Comics. Wow, this was just pure adrenaline. I just loved how fun and fast this is. We just talked about kind of what Star Wars was at its infancy. This is what Star Wars became in its purest form. Just fun and fast. There's so many things going on. So let's just briefly go through it. We have Leia being invited onto the Old Republic ship in the amid the ruins of Alderaan, and we have another Alderaanian. Is that what? I have no idea what they're called. Who salvaged as much of Alderaan as possible. And as he leaves the room, Leia does some snooping and finds out he is or was an Imperial, and he's more than willing to let Leia kill him or arrest him or whatever she deems necessary. But right before she's about to do what she's going to do, he reveals that she knows exactly who she is. She's not who she said he was. She's Leia Organa, Princess of Alderaan. And basically we find out this guy kind of helped design the Death Star, and he claims that he didn't throw the switch, but he might as well have. He's guilty of whatever Leia says he's guilty of, and he's appears to be incredibly remorseful, because apparently he probably was from Alderaan and didn't realize that was what they were going to do with it, kind of thing. But you built a giant super weapon, and then you're upset when people use it. So we'll see where that goes. Really like that. Really loved going back to Coruscant with Han and Chewie and Bossk and Boba Fett. That was all a lot of fun. Still written by Brian Wood, I should mention that. Ryan Kelly is doing great stuff here. Carlos de Anda I praised for his ability to capture spaceflight and starship battles. Well, Ryan Kelly's doing a pretty good job of that too. Got to give him a lot of credit. The chases through Coruscant's atmosphere and traffic streams and everything that's going on there, really, really awesome. Luke and Wedge on the Star Destroyer is incredibly fun, very reminiscent of Episode 4, obviously. Really like seeing Luke use his lightsaber and it being a big deal for him to pull it out and light it up. He's still kind of a blaster-first mentality, and him talking to Ben and as he's doing it and learning to use the Force and let it guide him, that was fantastic. More Han and Chewie on Coruscant, Boba Fett flying around in his jackpot, taking on Solo one-on-one, all sorts of big explosions and craziness going on. And we get some more Darth Vader, too, as he learns that Skywalker is one of the rebels taken aboard the Star Destroyer and that he's there. You know, he infiltrated, he meant to be captured. He orders Birasea to capture Luke and bring Luke to him directly. A little sentence issue there. And Vader kind of unleashes, he's alone by himself, there's no one around, but kind of unleashes that how stupid the Emperor is to put all his hope into another one of these battle stations, and that's not real power. The real power lies elsewhere in the universe. Probably the beginnings of his him going to try to convert Luke to help him overthrow the Empire. Just awesome stuff. One of my favorite series being published right now, but also a very, very good issue individually. Absolutely love what's going on with Dark Horse and their Star Wars titles right now. No other way to put it. All right, moving right along. Trillium number 2 picks up right where Trillium number 1 left off, as you might guess. And despite the fact that she is a human, the two of them cannot communicate to each other. It's been over 3,000 years, so you would imagine that language would change. She kind of recognizes it, but there's a big communication issue between these two. They don't know what the other one is saying. And watching Lemire play with that and play off of that is a ton of fun. We don't get nearly as much of Lemire's heady, trippy page and panel breakdowns as we did in the last one. Obviously, the whole flipbook aspect is not intact in this one. But it's incredibly effective all the same. Just a wonderful, wonderful comic that brings these two worlds kind of colliding together. And the Trillium flower is plentiful in this area. And just as she gets back, she discovers that what is the virus called? Excuse me. It is called the Call has apparently arrived on Earth. The colony at the edge of this solar system has just fallen. The Call is here. So it's closing in, but now she has access to a source of Trillium. Whether or not she knows how to get it and use it and all that stuff is beyond me. Really just, again, like seeing the communication try to happen. This woman is without her. I can't remember her name for the life of me. I should really look it up. I'm sorry. It's Nika. Sorry, that's her name, Nika. Because she doesn't have her AI with her anymore. It didn't come through. She can't contact anyone, obviously, because she's gone thousands of years into the past. And but she's so reliant on that technology, it takes her a long time. Like, you think now, like, if you got transported back in time, you probably would try to use your cell phone at first. It seems stupid when you're calm and you're thinking about it, but obviously there's nothing to, communicate with if you had a cell phone and you had gone back in time. But if it's hard to imagine, these people are even more reliant on their technology in this book than we are now. But we're getting there. So that was kind of cool to see her have to try to communicate. And then the Trillium, I won't spoil that surprise, but the Trillium helped things along right before things got a whole lot worse. Speaking of a whole lot worse, it's starting to get to me. I don't want it to start to get to me, but it's starting to get to me, and I can't help it. I am, of course, you don't know what I'm referring to. But I am referring to DC Universe versus Masters of the Universe number 1, Clash of Champions. I am not a fan of the artwork, first of all. I am really not a fan of Skeletor's design. I try not to get too wrapped up in designs, because that's all they are. They're designs. They come and they go. Life goes on. Superman's new costume isn't great, but I actually kind of enjoy it. But let's face it, if you love it, if you hate it, it's not sticking around. It's going to go back to the other one originally, and it'll change again after that, and blah, 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 blah. Superman's new costume, I don't like it, but I'm going to live with it. Skeletor's design, it's a little harder to live with. I do prefer in crossovers a shared universe style. One of my favorite crossovers of all time, and eventually I'll do a dedicated episode just to it, is new Teen Titans X-Men crossover. And they live in a shared universe where these two groups have always existed. There's a panel early on in that story where Cyborg says something about this used to be a skyscraper, so the X-Men trashed it. Media says they're outlaws. I wonder why we never try to take him down. Like, it's just that little thing lets you know that the Titans and the X-Men, and for the purposes of that comic, lived in the same universe. And that's kind of what we have here, in that Eternia knows about Earth, Earth knows about Eternia, members of the Justice League Dark know who Skeletor is, have heard of Eternia, have heard of like the stream of magic, and yada yada yada. But for the first issue, and again, the point of the first issue is to get you to buy the second. They didn't do anything to get me to buy the second. This is it's felt like a labored spinoff from the ongoing series, which I'm actually rather enjoying. I'm not going to lie. I kind of like the ongoing series. I like they're doing something different with it. It's not my Masters of the Universe or whatever the fan expression is, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't think I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on this one. It's just not fun. It's not entertaining, and I don't see the point. In a nutshell, that's what you got. On to Marvel. Indestructible Hulk number 13. Wow, it's been a while since I've read an Indestructible Hulk. I wonder what's going on. Oh, wait, I missed number 12. Number 12 ended Old West, dinosaurs. We are now medieval, King Arthur's court, and the Black Knight, one of my favorite kind of second-tier Avengers characters. Love that guy. Anyway, this is him kind of back in his element. We got some more time travel going on, of course. Missed 12, and I'm sad about it. I'll go back and pick it up at some point. Didn't really think the quality would drop off all that much, and needless to say, it has not even one bit. I do love this one-and-done style that Wade has adapted for this book. You could read, and similarly not read, any one of these issues and be caught up. There's an ongoing story, sure, but 12, pretty much self-contained, obviously, because I picked up 13 without any problems, and references back to 12. I remembered how 11 ended, so that was fine. 13, pretty much self-contained. We're not dealing with Black Knight and Arthur and stuff anymore by the time it ends. And I just loved it. Big and fun. Black Knight, King Arthur. What's not to love? Really liking the Hulk traveling through time. I really like that they are finding, they probably being Wade more than, S.H.I.E.L.D. within the comic, is they're finding a way to use the Hulk and make him effective. Banner's AI floating around in the robot is very, Skeets and Booster Gold, but I always love that dynamic. I mean, like a character like Deathlock, who kind of argues with his internal computer. That stuff is cool. And at the end, we get to Smart Hulk appears, which is awesome and always fun. And we get a dramatic cliffhanger here, too, of Hulk's last time jump heading back to his origin. And that might not seem like a lot, but with what Wade has already established in terms of what can and can't change and things like that, and what he's done with the Hulk in general, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. So hopefully I don't forget to order number 14 like I did number 12. Let's talk Infinity, number 2 of 6. Now, a little bit of event fatigue, right? Settling in. I talked about it back, I guess it's been on, it's been on like 11-ish episodes now. Went on my rant about events. I'm not doing Forever Evil at DC. I am doing Infinity, but it's very lackluster. Not too into it. Becoming less and less into it as each issue comes out. First of all, it really feels like you're missing out if you're not reading the tie-ins, and it shouldn't. The tie-ins should be supplemental, and there's a passing mention. Their stories and their plots are given brief mentions, but that's all. And it actually makes it worse to bring them up a little bit, I guess. I'm not sure. Really felt like I was out of the boat on it. It's interesting, epic to be sure. I'm really more of a fan of the Thanos and human stuff that's going on than the Avengers, Engineers, Architects battle that's happening out in deep space. Even though some of that was really cool to see, our heroes fighting, almost like DC heroes, fighting without ships and stuff, just floating in space with either equipment or because they're, gods or aliens, fighting giant ships, man to ship kind of thing. That was cool and dramatic, and Jerome Peña's artwork is fantastic. But I'm not really into it. I don't get the excitement that I usually get from an event, especially a Marvel event. However, the Black Bolt Inhuman stuff with Thanos, that stuff is all very, very interesting to me. So I'm very excited to kind of keep reading for that alone, at least at this point. But Infinity just is kind of falling flat for me so far. Let's talk about a very different type of comic, and comic that's pretty much unlike anything we've talked about so far here today. Superior Foes of Spider-Man number 3. This is, it's bizarre, to be very honest. The thing I've enjoyed the most so far about Superior Foes of Spider-Man is it playing on so much of Marvel history. A bizarre little corner of Marvel history, but still Marvel history. In this issue, it's even more apparent with the history of Silvermane, even if it's fake. Big several-page misdirection there. The entire history of the Beetle, the first Beetle, the second Beetle, where the first Beetle ended, all the Thunderbolts and the different Thunderbolts and all the things the Beetle's been doing. If you've been at all curious about where this new Beetle came from, we don't quite get that answered yet, but a lot of things going on there. References to the Scourge of the Underworld, the characters that were killed and subsequently came back thanks to the Hood. There, a lot of cool stuff. The story, most of it centers, as it always has been, around Boomerang still. But the newly formed Sinister Six is already breaking up, and Boomerang ends up at this supervillain support group with all these pathetic lowlives, mentioning some of the very bizarre corners of the Marvel Universe we mentioned before, are referenced there, and just the humor is still intact. The pop culture references are there, but they're kept to a minimum, and they're not quite as timely as most pop culture references are in comic books, which will drive you nuts. And it's just terrific fun all around. I really like the ending, nice finish, as the Boomerang kind of gets a little bit of revenge on the Sinister Six that betrayed him. Really bizarre, not for everybody kind of comic book, and I don't know what the reasoning for it is. Venom and Scarlet Spider's cancellations have been announced. It seems like they're kind of turning back on the Spider books, and as much as I love Superior Foes of Spider-Man, I don't know what the audience is like for it. It can't be bigger than Venom and Scarlet Spider, I wouldn't think. So I'm terrified that this is not going to be around much longer. But I'm just going to continue to enjoy it and proceed as if nothing is wrong. Nothing might not be anything wrong. I might just be getting freaked out for absolutely no reason. I have no idea what's going on. But again, it just concerns me that if Scarlet Spider and Venom don't have the audience to keep going, how much longer am I actually going to be able to enjoy Superior Foes of Spider-Man? So we will see. Time will tell. Last but not least, this week we're going to end, as it seems like we almost always do, with Superior Spider-Man. This issue is number 17, written by Dan Slott, art by Ryan Stegman, and this is it, folks. The Spider-Man of 2099 is coming to present day to battle the Spider-Man now, or as Dan Slott refers to at the end, Spidey now versus Spidey later. Oh, Dan Slott, you clever, clever man. Alright, so maybe his puns are bad, but still. Crafts a hell of a story. Can't argue with that. Ryan Stegman back on artwork. Absolutely fantastic. Right away, you realize how much you missed him. There's a great panel of Miguel, Spider-Man 2099, ditching his clothes on top of a very fast-moving bullet train, essentially, and the clothes are flying into the foreground at the reader, and he's way in the background. It's a brilliant panel, wonderfully constructed, and right away you're like, wow, Ryan Stegman needs to be on this all the time, even though I actually kind of enjoy the fill-in artist. Great, Spider-Man 2099 antics, the Alamex Corporation has kind of broken this time stream. They're trying to figure out the what's wrong, because their founder, Tyler Stone, or their CEO, whatever he is, Tyler Stone, is wasting away to nothingness. Is very Marty McFly type thing going on. So they're looking back in time to figure out at what point did time break so they can fix this. And of course, all these particles or whatever it is that are creeping out and allowing more dinosaurs and redcoats and World War I biplanes and all this stuff to escape out of this building. And they kind of pin it down at 2013. And they kind of bring it right into focus pretty quick that there's a lot of time stream incursions going on in 2013. You have the Hulk book, which we talked about. All New X-Men, which we didn't talk about. Maybe there's a reason for that, and you guys should all come back next episode and find out why I'm not talking about any X-Men books in this episode. And Kang, you have Age of Ultron going on. A lot of things going on in Marvel Comics right now, if you didn't realize it, that are messing with the time stream. So, of course, this would be where the time stream halted. And you kind of figure out pretty quick that there's something Spidey-related that's not the way it should be. And, of course, we all know what that is. So he goes back in time, and then we cut back to the Horizon Labs softball game. Very kind of X-Men-esque scene. Peter Parker, who we know is not Peter Parker, is taking the game way too seriously. Basically, Otto's finally got the physicality to be able to play sports and be a good athlete and have a girl in the stands cheer for him, and he's not going to waste it. Game is interrupted by an FBI helicopter. They've come to arrest Max Modell for all the illegal things going on there. We find out our whistleblower is Tiberius Stone. And quick interlude as we cut back to the Goblin Lair and Norrin putting the smackdown on Phil Urich and then realizing that maybe he has some use after all. Unfortunately, we don't get to find out what that use is. And we cut back to Horizon Labs as everybody is dealing with this fallout, why Max is arrested, who the whistleblower is, all this stuff. And who should show up but Liz Allen and Tiberius Stone, of course. And announcing basically their hostile takeover of... and that Liz Allen is now the majority shareholder of Horizon Labs. And she is owner of Allen Chemical. And the Alchem family. Alchemax, company from the future. We see where this is going. And it's brought up again later in case you didn't see where it's going. Peter Parker, Otto Octavius, Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man, Spock, whatever you want to call him, takes off after them just in a fit of rage. There's no legality behind going after them at all. The guys at Horizon Lab go to the time door thinking maybe they can go back in time and stop Tiberius Stone some way. As they do that, Spider-Man 2099 comes bursting through the other side of the door before they even get a chance to turn it on and tears off after Spider-Man. Liz Allen is very confused by Spider-Man's behavior, as she would be as someone who's known Peter Parker and Spider-Man, even if she doesn't know they're the same, for a very, very long time. Spider-Man has decided that, legality aside, who cares if there's anything illegal going on here or not, he's going after Tiberius Stone. Enter Spider-Man 2099, who stops him, lets him know that he is here to save tomorrow from today, and the showdown is how we finish our issue. Is it gimmicky? Fan service? You could probably argue it's any of those things. I think it's a pretty reasonable explanation. Some things that Slott has laid out that would allow for time travel to happen. People love Spider-Man 2099, whether they want to admit it or not, so it's fun to see him here. Stegman's artwork certainly helps sell that point even more. It's just fun, terrific comic books. If you've been a fan of what Slott's doing so far, you're going to like this, and if you're not going to like it because you need to say you don't like it to help make your point at every issue. But to me, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast. It was fun to have this. I mean, like the time door that's been established. Slott had set that up. You are allowing time travel. Plus, as he pointed out earlier, look at all the other time travel going on, and you can't say you love All New X-Men and then poo-poo the fact that Spider-Man 2099 gets to show up. If the original X-Men get to show up, so does Spider-Man 2099. You cannot like one or the other because of story or other things, or the fact that Peter's dead and you're still not getting over it. It'll again, like Spider-Man, like Superman's costume, it's changed before. It'll change again. Spider-Man's been dead before, technically. He'll come back. Don't worry about it. Settle down. Just relax. I always feel like I get preachy when I talk about Superior Spider-Man, but I just love what Slott's doing over there. I love everything about the book. I love the Spider-Man family titles, even if they're going away. Great stuff. And another week of another 2 weeks, I should say, of comic book reviews in the bag. So I want to thank you all for joining me on this DC free edition. I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but it's time to vote with my wallet and not just my mouth. And I don't like it, I'm not going to buy it. There we go. It's just that simple. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you're checking out PositivelyNerdy.com all the time for all sorts of cool stuff going up there. Follow me on Twitter at PositivelyNerdy would be the easiest way to keep up on everything Positively Nerdy related, if I could talk. That's going on the site and the podcast and everything else. So definitely want to do that. And until next time, guys, celebrate comics, celebrate your fandom.